The Zephyrian research vessel Silent Observer hung in the void between stars, its sensors trained on the third planet of a yellow dwarf system. Senior xenobiologist Kethvar adjusted the long-range scanners with practiced precision, watching the data streams cascade across holographic displays. For 3 cycles, the Galactic Council had tasked his team with studying the indigenous species of this unremarkable world. Humans, they called themselves. Another conflict has erupted, announced his assistant, Veltar, her crystalline voice carrying notes of confusion. The northern continent shows massive energy signatures, kinetic bombardments, plasma discharges, and something else we cannot identify. Kethvar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of deep contemplation among his people. The humans fascinated and disturbed him in equal measure. Unlike every other sentient species discovered by the Galactic Council, humans seemed incapable of achieving lasting peace. Where the Zephyrians had evolved past violence millennia ago, where the court-highs settled disputes through mental bonding, and where the crystalline Veltani resolved conflicts through harmonic resonance, humans perpetually waged war against their own kind. Initiate close observation protocol, Kethvar ordered. Deploy stealth drones to ground level. I want detailed behavioral analysis of their combat patterns. The ship's artificial intelligence, a marvel of Zephyrian biotechnology, responded instantly. Drones deployed. Estimated time to surface, 14 minutes. Warning, detected electromagnetic interference suggests the humans have developed primitive but effective detection systems. Kethvar dismissed the concern with a wave of his manipulator appendage. Human technology remained centuries behind Galactic Council standards. Their crude chemical propulsion, their reliance on metal projectiles, their inability to harness quantum fields, all of it marked them as a species barely emerging from planetary infancy. The first drone feeds appeared on a screen, showing a devastated landscape that had once been a human city. Structures lay in ruins, fires burned unchecked, and the air shimmered with heat distortions from recent explosions. Yet what captured Kethvar's attention was not the destruction, but the movement within it. Small groups of humans moved through the wreckage with purpose. They carried wounded companions despite obvious personal risk. They shared scarce resources even when facing starvation. They coordinated complex rescue operations while enemy fire rained down around them. Most puzzling of all, they continued fighting not for territory or resources, but for abstract concepts they called freedom and justice. Veltar, analyse de behavioral patterns, Kethvar instructed. Focus on their decision-making under extreme stress. His assistant's form shimmered as she processed the incoming data through her crystalline neural matrix. Preliminary analysis shows significant deviation from standard survival protocols. Humans consistently prioritize group welfare over individual preservation. They demonstrate willingness to sacrifice personal resources for strangers. Most unusual, they appear to fight harder when facing overwhelming odds. Kethvar studied a particular feed showing a human medical station. Despite constant bombardment, human healers worked tirelessly to treat wounded soldiers from both sides of the conflict. They made no distinction between friend and enemy when administering care, a concept so foreign to Zephyrian military doctrine that his translation matrix struggled to process it. Expand the observation grid, he ordered. I want comprehensive coverage of all combat zones. Over the following days, the data accumulated in ways that challenged everything Kethvar thought he understood about warfare. The humans displayed tactical brilliance that rivaled species with centuries more technological development. They adapted their strategies in real time, compensating for inferior equipment through innovation and determination. But more than their tactical skill, their motivation mystified him. Human soldiers fought not for conquest or dominance, but to protect civilians they had never met. They risked everything to preserve ideals that existed only in their collective imagination. They mourned enemies as deeply as they mourned friends, showing a capacity for empathy that seemed to transcend biological programming. Sir, Veltar interrupted his contemplation. Long-range sensors detect approaching vessels. Configuration unknown, but energy signatures suggest hostile intent. Kethvar turned his attention to the tactical display. 3 massive ships emerged from hyperspace, their hull configurations unlike anything in the Galactic Council database. Dark metal surfaces absorbed sensor sweeps, and weapon arrays bristled along their flanks like spines on a predatory creature. Analysis? He demanded. Unknown species. Technology appears significantly advanced. They're taking position around the human planet. Veltar's crystalline form pulsed with alarm frequencies. Sir, they are charging weapons. The entire human population is at risk. Kethvar faced a crucial decision. Galactic Council protocols strictly forbade interference with pre-contact species. Yet as he watched the alien vessels prepare their assault, something stirred within him that transcended scientific objectivity. The humans, for all their flaws, possessed something remarkable, something worth preserving. Continue observations, he commanded quietly. Record everything. The Council will want to understand what happens next. The first salvo from the unknown vessel struck Earth's northern hemisphere with devastating force. Cities vanished in blossoms of superheated plasma, and electromagnetic pulses crippled communication networks across entire continents. Kethvar watched the carnage unfold through his sensor arrays, recording every detail while his scientific mind struggled to process the scale of destruction. Casualty estimates, he asked, though he dreaded the answer. Veltar's calculations flickered across holographic displays. Initial bombardment eliminated approximately 12 million humans. Secondary effects from infrastructure collapse will likely claim millions more within the next planetary rotation. The alien fleet, which Kethvar had begun thinking of as the Devourers based on their systematic approach to planetary sterilization, maintained perfect formation as they prepared for their second assault. Their ships moved with mechanical precision, treating the extermination of an entire species as nothing more than a routine pest control operation. But something unexpected happened as the Devourers repositioned their weapons. Human military installations, thought destroyed in the initial attack, suddenly blazed alive. Hidden missile silos opened across the planet's surface, revealing that humanity had not been caught as unprepared as it appeared. Thousands of projectiles streaked toward the alien vessels, primitive by galactic standards, but launched with such coordination and timing that even Kethvar found himself impressed. How are they coordinating? Veltar under the load. Their communication networks were severed. The answer became clear as Kethvar studied the human response patterns. They were not coordinating through technology, but through something far more fundamental. Each human military unit operated according to predetermined protocols, but adapted those protocols based on local conditions and initiative. Where other species required constant communication to function, humans seemed to anticipate each other's actions through shared understanding and trust. The first wave of human missiles impacted the lead Devourer vessel, and Kethvar watched in amazement as primitive nuclear warheads breached advanced deflector shields through sheer volume and persistence. The ship's hull cracked, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Impossible, Veltar whispered. Their weapons should not have penetrated those shields. Unless, Kethvar replied slowly, the humans calculated the exact resonance frequency needed to disrupt the shield matrix. But that would require computational power and theoretical understanding far beyond their apparent technological level. The second wave of human attacks confirmed his suspicion. Rather than random bombardment, the missiles targeted specific points on the Devourer's ships, locations that corresponded to critical system junctions only visible through advanced structural analysis. Somehow, the humans had deduced the alien ship configurations and identified vulnerabilities within hours of first contact. The Devourer fleet responded with increased aggression, raining destruction across the planet's surface. But For every human city that burned, another hidden installation revealed itself. Underground factories produced replacement weapons at impossible speeds. Orbital platforms, thought to be obsolete communication satellites, revealed themselves as sophisticated weapons platforms. Most remarkably, civilian populations began evacuating through networks of underground tunnels that seemed to span entire continents. They have been preparing, HFY realized, not just for the specific threat, but for any threat. Their entire civilization is designed around survival and resistance. His observation drones captured scenes that defied everything he thought he knew about human nature. In cities under bombardment, humans organized themselves into efficient evacuation chains without central authority. Teachers led children to safety while parents they had never met stayed behind to fight. Scientists worked frantically to analyze alien technology from crashed debris, sharing their discoveries instantly with military units across the globe. Most astounding of all, human soldiers captured in the initial assault had somehow escaped from Devour holding cells and transmitted detailed intelligence about alien ship interiors. The escape seemed impossible until HFY reviewed the footage and saw humans using improvised tools and unprecedented cooperation to overcome security systems designed for species far more physically capable. "Sir," Veltar announced with urgency, "the Devourer ships are changing tactics. They're deploying ground forces." Massive transport vessels launched from the alien fleet, carrying what appeared to be mechanized infantry units toward Earth's surface. Each transport held enough firepower to level a human city, and their armor could withstand direct hits from the strongest human weapons. But the humans had one more surprise. As the first Devourer transports entered the atmosphere, they encountered not just anti-aircraft fire, but coordinated attacks from fighter craft that should not have existed. Human pilots flew vessels cobbled together from commercial aircraft, armed with weapons improvised from industrial equipment. They flew with reckless courage, ramming their fragile ships into alien transports when ammunition ran out. "They're sacrificing themselves," Veltar observed, her voice carrying harmonics of distress. "No," HFY corrected her, studying the tactical displays more carefully. "They're buying time. Each sacrifice achieves a specific objective, creating debris fields to block landing zones, forcing the enemy to alter approach vectors, gathering intelligence through close-range scanning." The pattern became clear as he watched the battle unfold. Every human action, no matter how desperate it appeared, served multiple purposes. When pilots crashed their aircraft into alien ships, other humans recorded the impacts to learn about alien armor properties. When soldiers made suicidal charges against impossible odds, they drew fire away from evacuating civilians while simultaneously probing enemy defensive capabilities. The humans were not just fighting, they were learning. With each exchange, they adapted their tactics based on new information. They turned every defeat into a lesson, every loss into an opportunity to understand their enemies better. As the first day of invasion drew to a close, HFY found himself viewing the conflict with new eyes. The humans were losing by every conventional measure. Their casualties mounted, their cities burned, their infrastructure crumbled. Yet something in their response suggested that they understood warfare on a level that transcended simple victory or defeat. "Veltar," he said quietly, "prepare a secure transmission to the Galactic Council. Priority 1, classification. What should the message contain?" HFY studied the tactical displays, watching humans continue their impossible resistance against overwhelming odds. "Tell them we may have underestimated this species by the third day of the invasion. The landscape of the conflict had transformed into something HFY could barely recognize. The Devourer fleet maintained orbital supremacy and controlled major population centers, yet their systematic extermination of humanity had stalled in ways that defied military logic. Human resistance had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Small units operated independently across the planet, using tactics that seemed to emerge from collective understanding rather than centralized command. They struck at alien supply lines with surgical precision, melted back into civilian populations before retaliation could arrive, and somehow maintained coordination across vast distances without detectable communication networks. "The humans are ghosts," Veltar reported, her crystalline form flickering with frustrated processing cycles. "Our sensors track devourer forces easily, but human units appear and vanish without pattern. They seem to exist in spaces that should not provide concealment." Kethvar studied the sensor logs more carefully and gradually began to understand. The humans were not hiding in impossible places. They were hiding in plain sight, using camouflage techniques that relied on understanding alien psychology rather than advanced technology. They had somehow deduced how devourer sensors functioned and were exploiting blind spots in ways that suggested deep knowledge of alien cognitive patterns. "How are they learning so quickly?" he wondered aloud. The answer came from an unexpected source. His monitoring equipment detected a faint transmission from the planet's surface, not directed at any human receiver, but broadcast into space itself. The message was in mathematical format, using prime number sequences that served as a universal language base. "Unknown observers," the transmission began. "We know you're watching. We request dialogue." Kethvar felt his respiratory chambers constrict with shock. Somehow, the humans had detected his cloaked vessel despite technology that should have been invisible to their primitive sensors. More than that, they had chosen to reach out rather than attack, demonstrating a level of strategic thinking that impressed and unnerved him. "Should I respond?" Veltar asked. "Galactic Council protocols strictly forbid," Kethvar began, then stopped. The protocols had been written assuming orderly contact with peaceful species, not emergency situations involving possible genocide. "Monitor the transmission. Let me hear what they have to say." The human message continued with startling directness. "We know our technology appears primitive to you. We know you could destroy us easily if you chose. But we also know you are scientists, not conquerors. We ask only for information that might help us protect innocent lives." What followed was a detailed analysis of devourer technology based on observations from just 3 days of conflict. The humans had identified power coupling systems, weapon charging cycles, and structural weak points with accuracy that rivaled Galactic Council intelligence reports. They had done this without advanced scanners, without quantum computers, without any of the tools that other species considered essential for such analysis. They're using distributed intelligence, Kethvar realized. Every human observes and reports. Every encounter generates data that spreads throughout their population. They're treating their entire species as a single research organism. The transmission shifted to a request that made Kethvar's neural pathways spark with conflict. "We do not ask you to violate your protocols by helping us fight. We ask only that you record what happens here accurately. We believe this conflict represents something important, not just for humans, but for all thinking beings." Before Kethvar could formulate a response, alarms echoed through the silent observer. Long-range sensors detected new arrivals. A second devourer fleet, larger than the first, emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Fleet composition analysis, he ordered urgently. 12 capital ships, 47 heavy cruisers, over 200 support vessels, Veltar reported. Total firepower sufficient to sterilize multiple inhabited worlds. The human transmission had apparently detected the new arrivals as well, because the signal changed frequency and intensity. "New contacts confirmed. We estimate 7 days before our organized resistance collapses. If you choose to record our end, please remember that we died trying to protect something beautiful." Kethvar found himself studying the human population centers through his sensors with new eyes. Despite the ongoing bombardment, despite casualties that would have broken any other species, humans continued their daily lives wherever possible. Schools operated in underground shelters. Artists created works inspired by their struggle. Scientists published research papers analyzing alien technology and sharing discoveries freely with anyone who might benefit. Most remarkably, human military forces continued to show restraint even under the worst conditions. When they captured alien technology, they studied it for defensive applications rather than developing new weapons of mass destruction. When they interrogated captured Devourer personnel, they followed protocols designed to preserve prisoner dignity. They fought like desperate animals when protecting innocents, but maintained moral standards that many advanced civilizations had abandoned during peacetime. "Sir," Veltar announced, "I am detecting massive movement from the human forces. Something is happening." The tactical display revealed a coordinated operation spanning multiple continents. Human units were converging on sites that appeared to be industrial facilities, but the energy signatures suggested something far more sophisticated than primitive manufacturing. Were they building? Ketvar wondered. His question was answered when the first facility came online. Power readings spiked beyond anything previously recorded from human technology, and space around the planet began to shimmer with exotic energy patterns. The humans had somehow constructed a planetary defense grid using principles that seemed to blend their primitive engineering with advanced concepts they had learned by observing alien technology. The second Devourer fleet arrived to find Earth defended by weapons that should not have existed. Human-built particle cannons engaged alien capital ships with focused streams of energy that could penetrate advanced armor. Gravity manipulators, impossible devices for a species that had only recently achieved spaceflight, created tactical advantages by altering local space-time geometry. They built those in 3 days? Veltar asked in disbelief. "No," Kethvar replied, studying the construction analysis. "They built the components over years, possibly decades. They were prepared for a threat they had never encountered, using principles they should not have understood. The battle that followed challenged every assumption about technological limitations and species development that Kethvar had accepted throughout his career. Humans wielded advanced weapons with the desperate fury of a cornered animal, but also with tactical sophistication that suggested deep understanding of multidimensional warfare. More importantly, they fought not just to survive, but to preserve something larger than themselves. Every strategic decision prioritized the protection of non-combatants, the preservation of knowledge, and the continuation of human culture. They treated the conflict not as a struggle between species, but as a defense of principles that transcended biological origin. As the second day of the expanded battle drew to a close, Kethvar realized that he was not just observing a war. He was witnessing the emergence of something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans were teaching themselves to become something more than they had been, using the crucible of mortal conflict to forge capabilities that should have taken centuries to develop. The turning point came when Kethvar least expected it. 7 days into the expanded conflict, with human resistance showing signs of inevitable collapse despite their remarkable adaptations, something changed in the nature of the battle itself. The Devourers, who had fought with mechanical precision throughout the invasion, began making tactical errors. Analysis of enemy behavior patterns, Kethvar ordered, studying the tactical displays with growing confusion. Veltar's crystalline matrix pulsed through several processing cycles before responding. Devourer forces are showing decreased coordination efficiency. Response times to human attacks have increased by an average of 17%. Most significantly, they appear to be avoiding certain engagement zones without apparent tactical justification. The explanation became clear when Kethvar accessed the detailed sensor logs from human-controlled territories. In areas where the fighting had been most intense, something unprecedented was occurring. Human soldiers were not simply fighting Devourer forces, they were communicating with them. Capture transmissions revealed the impossible truth. Humans had somehow learned fragments of Devourer language and were broadcasting messages during combat encounters. Not threats or propaganda, but questions about Devourer motivations, offers to share resources, and even expressions of sympathy for alien soldiers trapped far from home. They're trying to understand their enemies as individuals, Kethvar realized with amazement. Even while fighting for survival, They are attempting to establish dialogue. The strategy seemed suicidal, yet analysis of combat outcomes showed it was achieving measurable results. Devourer units exposed to human communication attempts fought with less aggression. Some alien soldiers had even been observed hesitating during assault operations, creating openings that human forces exploited with precision timing. More remarkably, humans had begun caring for wounded Devourer personnel alongside their own casualties. Medical facilities in human-controlled territory treated alien injured according to the same protocols used for human patients, despite having no previous knowledge of Devourer physiology. Sir, Veltar announced with obvious distress harmonics. Long-range scanners are detecting a third fleet approaching the system. Configuration analysis suggests these are Devourer command vessels, likely containing leadership hierarchies. Kethvar studied the incoming force composition and felt his respiratory chambers constrict. The approaching ships carried enough firepower to crack planetary crusts, and their formation patterns indicated they were prepared to end the conflict through total planetary sterilization. But even as the greatest threat yet approached, the humans continued their impossible evolution. Ground-based observatories had somehow detected the incoming fleet before Galactic Council sensors, and were already preparing countermeasures that defied conventional understanding. Human broadcasts intercepted by the silent observer revealed a coordinated effort unlike anything in recorded history. Across the planet, scientists were sharing research data in real time, combining their individual discoveries into collective understanding that advanced at exponential rates. Engineers worked around the clock to implement theoretical concepts that had been pure speculation just days earlier. Most remarkably, philosophers and ethicists were providing guidance on how to wage war while preserving moral integrity. "They're becoming something new," Kethvar whispered, watching the data streams cascade across his displays. The transformation was visible in every aspect of human behavior. Military units operated with efficiency that rivaled the most advanced AI systems, yet maintained individual creativity and initiative. Civilian populations showed courage under bombardment that exceeded the standards of professional soldiers from other species. Children adapted to conditions that would traumatize adults from more developed civilizations. When the Third Devourer fleet arrived, they found Earth defended not just by advanced weapons, but by a species that had fundamentally altered the nature of warfare itself. Human forces engaged the alien command vessels with tactics that seemed to anticipate enemy actions before they occurred. They fought with desperate fury when necessary, but also demonstrated restraint that preserved opportunities for peaceful resolution. The decisive moment came when a human transmission reached the flagship of the Devourer command fleet, not through technological means, but through a captured communication relay that had been reprogrammed to broadcast in perfect Devourer language. "Leaders of the fleet that brings darkness," the message began. "We speak not as conquered prey, but as beings who have learned something important through our struggle. You come to our world because you see us as threats to be eliminated. But we have spent these days learning about your people, not just your technology. We know your homeworld is dying. We know your population faces extinction. We know you believe conquest is the only path to survival." Kethvar found himself holding his breath as the transmission continued. "We offer an alternative. Our world has resources. Our people have skills. Instead of taking our planet through destruction, let us share it through cooperation. We have proven we can learn quickly. Give us the chance to prove we can build solutions together." The response from the Devourer command ship came after several tense minutes. Not weapons fire, but a communication signal requesting detailed discussion of the human proposal. "Impossible, Veltaru isput." The Devourers have never negotiated. Their entire civilization is built around conquest and dominance. But Kethvar was beginning to understand something that transcended normal species interactions. The humans had not just defended their world. They had demonstrated something that challenged fundamental assumptions about survival and competition. They had shown that intelligence applied with compassion could find solutions where brute force created only temporary victories. The negotiations that followed lasted 3 days and revealed truths that would reshape galactic civilization. The Devourers had indeed faced extinction on their homeworld, and had turned to conquest because their rigid social structure prevented them from conceiving alternatives. The humans, despite their apparent technological primitiveness, offered collaborative solutions that addressed Devourer survival needs while preserving human autonomy. More importantly, the humans shared their most dangerous secret, the truth that had driven their rapid development. They had been preparing for alien contact for decades, not because they detected specific threats, but because they understood that intelligence inevitably led to expansion beyond planetary boundaries. They had developed their defensive capabilities not to wage war, but to ensure they would have the strength to choose cooperation when contact finally came. As Kethvar watched human and Devourer teams work together to establish preliminary settlement agreements, he realized that he was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Two species, separated by vast differences in technology and culture, were creating a partnership based on mutual benefit rather than dominance. The humans had taught the Devourers that survival could be achieved through cooperation. The Devourers had taught the humans that the galaxy contained challenges that required advanced technology to overcome. Together, they were discovering that intelligence applied with wisdom could transcend the limitations that defined most civilizations. Veltar, Kethvar said quietly, prepare a comprehensive report for the Galactic Council. Mark it as species reclassification. Priority absolute. 4-6 months after the final shots were fired in Earth's orbit, Kethvar stood in the observation deck of a silent observer and studied a world transformed. Where once he had seen a primitive planet struggling with internal conflicts, he now observed the hub of an unprecedented interspecies collaboration that was reshaping both human and Devourer civilizations. The partnership had exceeded every optimistic projection. Human agricultural technology, enhanced with Devourer biotechnology, had begun reversing the ecological collapse that threatened the alien homeworld. Devourer engineering knowledge, guided by human ethical frameworks, was constructing sustainable colonies that preserved local ecosystems while supporting expanding populations. Most remarkably, both species were developing new technologies that neither could have achieved independently. Final assessment report completed, Veltar announced, her crystalline form resonating with what Kethvar had learned to recognize as satisfaction harmonics. Galactic Council Directive fulfilled. Comprehensive species evaluation ready for transmission. Kethvar reviewed the data one final time, knowing that his conclusions would influence how the galaxy's governing body approached humanity for centuries to come. Every chart and analysis supported the same startling conclusion. Humans represented something entirely new in galactic civilization. The breakthrough had not been their technology, though they had proven capable of remarkable innovation under pressure. It had not been their military prowess, though they had fought with courage that impressed even veteran observers. The critical factor had been something more fundamental: their ability to see cooperation as strength rather than weakness, to treat diversity as an asset rather than a threat, and to approach challenges with the assumption that solutions existed for those willing to work together to find them. They did something unprecedented, Kethvar reflected, speaking as much to himself as to his assistant. They turned a war of extinction into a foundation for mutual prosperity. They transformed their greatest enemy into their strongest ally. The transformation had not been easy for either species. Humans have been forced to accelerate their technological development by centuries in a matter of months, accepting changes that strained their social structures and challenged their philosophical assumptions. Devourers had been required to abandon conquest-based thinking that had defined their civilization for millennia, learning to value creation over destruction and cooperation over dominance. Yet both species had not merely adapted, they had thrived. Human creativity, unleashed by access to advanced technology, was producing innovations that surprised even Devourer scientists. Devourer efficiency, guided by human ethical considerations, was achieving unprecedented harmony between technological advancement and environmental preservation. The partnership was already attracting attention from other species. The Court High had sent diplomatic envoys to study human conflict resolution techniques. The Veltani were collaborating with joint human-devourer teams on projects that combined crystalline harmonic technology with hybrid biological mechanical systems. Even the isolated Xerian Empire had emerged from their self-imposed quarantine to observe the unprecedented cooperation developing around Earth. "Sir," Veltar interrupted his contemplation, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It appears to be directed specifically at our vessel." The message carrier was Dr. Sarah Chun, one of the human scientists who had played a key role in the initial contact negotiations. She appeared on the communication screen with the kind of warm directness that Kethvar had learned to associate with human interaction styles. "Senior xenobiologist Kethvar," she began, somehow knowing exactly who would be receiving her message. "We wanted to thank you for your careful observation during our crisis. We know you could have remained hidden, but you chose to witness our struggle. That choice mattered more than you might realize." What followed was an analysis that demonstrated just how thoroughly the humans had understood their situation from the beginning. They had detected the silent observer within hours of its arrival, but had chosen not to reveal that knowledge until the moment when communication might serve a greater purpose. They had used the knowledge that they were being observed to craft their responses with an awareness that their actions would be recorded and evaluated by an advanced galactic civilization. "We fought not just for survival," Dr. Chen continued, "but to prove that our species deserved a place among the stars. We knew that our first contact with galactic civilization would define how we were perceived for generations to come. We chose to demonstrate our values through our actions, hoping that observers like yourself would recognize something worth preserving." The transmission concluded with an invitation that made Kethvar's neural pathways spark with possibilities. The humans and Devourers were requesting formal contact with the Galactic Council, not as individual species seeking membership, but as a collaborative partnership offering new models for interspecies cooperation. "They are proposing to transform galactic civilization itself," Veltar observed. Kethvar studied the formal proposal documents that accompanied the transmission. The Human-Devourer Partnership was offering to share their collaborative technologies, their conflict resolution techniques, and their philosophical frameworks with any species willing to explore alternatives to traditional competition-based interactions. More significantly, they were volunteering to serve as mediators for species conflicts, offering their unique perspective on finding cooperative solutions to zero-sum problems. They had somehow transformed their greatest weakness, their inexperience with galactic civilization, into their greatest strength by approaching familiar problems with completely fresh perspectives. "Prepare the final transmission to the Council," Kethvar ordered. "Include full documentation of everything we have observed, complete technical analyses of their capabilities, and my personal recommendation for immediate formal contact." As he compiled his conclusions, Kethvar reflected on how profoundly the experience had changed his own understanding of intelligence and civilization. He had begun his observation mission believing that he understood the fundamental principles governing species development and interstellar relations. The humans had proved that those principles were just starting points, not absolute limits. They had shown that warfare could become cooperation, that enemies could become partners, and that civilizations could transform themselves through conscious choice rather than evolutionary pressure. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that intelligence guided by compassion could solve problems that intelligence guided by self-interest could not even comprehend. "Message prepared and transmitted," Veltar reported. "Council response expected within 2 planetary rotations." Kethvar watched the blue-green world turning slowly below, knowing that he was witnessing the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The humans had not just survived their first contact with alien intelligence. They had transformed it into an opportunity that would benefit every thinking being in the galaxy. The truth he could not forget was simple, but profound. Intelligence without wisdom led to extinction, but intelligence combined with compassion could transcend every limit that divided species and create possibilities that no single civilization could imagine alone. The age of cooperation was beginning, and it started with a species that had once been considered too primitive to matter. The galaxy would never be the same, and Kethvar found himself grateful to have witnessed the transformation of everything he thought he understood about what it meant to be truly intelligent. The Zephyrian research vessel Silent Observer hung in the void between stars, its sensors trained on the third planet of a yellow dwarf system. Senior xenobiologist Kethvar adjusted the long-range scanners with practiced precision, watching the data streams cascade across holographic displays. For 3 cycles, the Galactic Council had tasked his team with studying the indigenous species of this unremarkable world. Humans, they called themselves. Another conflict has erupted, announced his assistant, Veltar, her crystalline voice carrying notes of confusion. The northern continent shows massive energy signatures, kinetic bombardments, plasma discharges, and something else we cannot identify. Kethvar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of deep contemplation among his people. The humans fascinated and disturbed him in equal measure. Unlike every other sentient species discovered by the Galactic Council, humans seemed incapable of achieving lasting peace. Where the Zephyrians had evolved past violence millennia ago, where the court highs settled disputes through mental bonding, and where the crystalline Veltani resolved conflicts through harmonic resonance, humans perpetually waged war against their own kind. Initiate close observation protocol, Kethvar ordered. Deploy stealth drones to ground level. I want detailed behavioral analysis of their combat patterns. The ship's artificial intelligence, a marvel of Zephyrian biotechnology, responded instantly. Drones deployed. Estimated time to surface, 14 minutes. Warning. Detected electromagnetic interference suggests the humans have developed primitive but effective detection systems. Kethvar dismissed the concern with a wave of his manipulator appendage. Human technology remained centuries behind Galactic Council standards. Their crude chemical propulsion, their reliance on metal projectiles, their inability to harness quantum fields, all of it marked them as a species barely emerging from planetary infancy. The first drone feeds appeared on a screen, showing a devastated landscape that had once been a human city. Structures lay in ruins, fires burned unchecked, and the air shimmered with heat distortions from recent explosions. Yet what captured Kethvar's attention was not the destruction, but the movement within it. Small groups of humans moved through the wreckage with purpose. They carried wounded companions despite obvious personal risk. They shared scarce resources even when facing starvation. They coordinated complex rescue operations while enemy fire rained down around them. Most puzzling of all, they continued fighting not for territory or resources, but for abstract concepts they called freedom and justice. Veltar analyzed the behavioral patterns Kethvar instructed. Focus on their decision-making under extreme stress. His assistant's form shimmered as she processed the incoming data through her crystalline neural matrix. Preliminary analysis shows significant deviation from standard survival protocols. Humans consistently prioritize group welfare over individual preservation. They demonstrate willingness to sacrifice personal resources for strangers. Most unusual, they appear to fight harder when facing overwhelming odds. Kethvar studied a particular feed showing a human medical station. Despite constant bombardment, human healers worked tirelessly to treat wounded soldiers from both sides of the conflict. They made no distinction between friend and enemy when administering care, a concept so foreign to Zephyrian military doctrine that his translation matrix struggled to process it. Expand the observation grid, he ordered. I want comprehensive coverage of all combat zones. Over the following days, the data accumulated in ways that challenged everything HFY thought he understood about warfare. The humans displayed tactical brilliance that rivaled species with centuries more technological development. They adapted their strategies in real time, compensating for inferior equipment through innovation and determination. But more than their tactical skill, their motivation mystified him. Human soldiers fought not for conquest or dominance, but to protect civilians they had never met. They risked everything to preserve ideals that existed only in their collective imagination. They mourned enemies as deeply as they mourned friends, showing a capacity for empathy that seemed to transcend biological programming. Sir, Veltar interrupted his contemplation. Long-range sensors detect approaching vessels. Configuration unknown, but energy signatures suggest hostile intent. HFY turned his attention to the tactical display. 3 massive ships emerged from hyperspace, their hull configurations unlike anything in the Galactic Council database. Dark metal surfaces absorbed sensor sweeps, and weapon arrays bristled along their flanks like spines on a predatory creature. Analysis? He demanded. Unknown species. Technology appears significantly advanced. They're taking position around the human planet. Veltar's crystalline form pulsed with alarm frequencies. Sir, they are charging weapons. The entire human population is at risk. HFY faced a crucial decision. Galactic Council protocols strictly forbade interference with pre-contact species. Yet as he watched the alien vessels prepare their assault, something stirred within him that transcended scientific objectivity. The humans, for all their flaws, possess something remarkable, something worth preserving. Continue observations, he commanded.